you know what do you want? If you want to build wealth, like look at what the wealthy are doing. Look at the millionaire next door. They're not driving the shiniest, newest Lamborghini. They're literally like, you wouldn't even know that they're a millionaire.
Detailers Roadmap Cruise Control, where we navigate the roadways of life, business, and everything in between. Hey guys, it's Kevin Davis from the Cruise Control Podcast. Today I'm going to be here with Michelle Jacobik. Super excited to have her. By the way, great radio and audiobook voice. I've been listening to her book, and not all authors should read their own books. Let me just say that. Michelle's awesome. She's got a great background for that. But super excited to have her on. Hey, before I forget, go to detailsroadmap.com. Use that little button at the top. Get a message out to Pat. You can fill out that form. Pat will get on board with you. He'll walk you through your website, your SEO, everything that's going on. And he may say, hey, look, you're fine. Or he may say you can make a couple of tweaks. Or he may say, hey, look, let's redo the whole thing. Come on board with us. But any way that you need to do it, he'll walk you through it. So go to detailersroadmap.com and use that little button. Hey, Michelle Jacobik is a business, let me get my thing out of the way, business mentor, author, and former agency owner who knows how to build, grow, and exit profitably. I want to talk about exit strategy too. After buying the insurance agency she worked for at 29, she scaled it from 1,100 to over 7,600 clients, specializing in garage businesses before making a 7-figure exit. Congrats, by the way. Today, Michelle helps entrepreneurs grow profits with purpose, design lives they don't need a vacation from, and build businesses ready to sell. She's also the author of Path to Profits, which is, if you're watching this video, over her left shoulder. And so check that out, audiobook and normal hard copy too. And she's also got some other books, so we can talk about that. Michelle, thank you so much. We connected not too long ago, but it was like, it's kind of this instant connection. And when you read kind of your mission, it's completely aligned with mine. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun to hear your story. What I've been trying to do, so that just to give you some backstory on this, a lot of times, like I've walked through industry leaders, detailing shops. And then one of my big goals, though, is to try to bring in people into the podcast that most of the people listening to the podcast probably would have no exposure to. Like they're not hanging out in marketing groups and sales groups and all that stuff that we hang out in. And so I'm super excited to have you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here too. And surprisingly, we probably do hang out in some of the same rooms, right? Because I like the traditional, like, how do you build it when you're a brick and mortar versus what everybody's trying to tell you to do online. So, and that kind of speaks to your audience, right? The detailers, the guys that are out there, women that are out there, like in their communities, trying to let people know that they're open for business and looking for more,
Yeah, 100%. Hey, I always ask for the superhero backstory. We just found out before we started recording that you are a Wonder Woman fan like my Michelle, have an awesome name. But tell us kind of your backstory. And you told me you've been an entrepreneur for 37 years.
Yeah.
I'm not that far behind you with those numbers, but that I want to know that story and that journey, because I think so many of us, especially guys that are girls that have been kind of short term at it. They're like, well, it's time to give up. Or why am I not right? Like, why am I not farther? I still do that. And I've been in business forever. Right.
Yes.
And so tell us that story and give us that background.
I think this is probably going to be my favorite question, because I think what happens a lot of times, we are looking at other people's lives and saying, oh, how did they get there? I'm stuck in the mud and it's a mess. And what you don't realize is that your beginning is somebody else's middle, or your middle is somebody else's end, right? So I also love for myself, when I had to start building this personal brand versus a brick and mortar, one of the things that I realized is that you can read the bio and you can talk about all the successes, but the truth is that the messy middle, when I start sharing those pieces, this backstory, that's really where the connection and the hope that people that are on this entrepreneurial journey can grab onto. And so for me, well, let me tell you, I had a very humble upbringing, right? Both of my parents worked for a municipality, the city that we lived in. My dad worked for Public Works. My mom worked in the finance department. And at age 10, my mother literally gave me the skill of balancing the family checkbook. Okay, the check
Nice.
register. I was 10 years old, and I remember her handing me that and being like, "Yeah, this is going to be one of your monthly chores." And I thought, that's weird. I hated math. I didn't love school. I loved the social aspects of school. And I remember just thinking, like, really more math? Little did I know that she was actually planting a seed, right? That there was this essence of like financial literacy that was happening when I was 10 years old. However, I
Which
also
most 20-year-olds don't have. Most 30-year-olds
Oh,
don't
no.
have.
Yeah, well, wait till you hear my real story, right? So, I also at that age, I watched my mother and my grandmother plan every dollar, right? So there wasn't a lot of dollars. So they broke up everything from coupons to layaways to Christmas clubs and putting $5 a week from the paycheck at the bank and the passbook. And I just remember thinking like, wow, I'm witnessing penny pinching. Like we can't afford anything, right? Like everything is paycheck to paycheck. And then I just remember thinking like, I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to do that. I am totally not going to live that way. Fast forward, right? I moved out at 19 years old. I had a huge sense of adult confidence. I had just finished my associate's degree, right? From my community college, which was amazing, by the way. But I had all of this confidence. And I truly believed that when I left out that I was going to make it so much different than them. I had the freedom bug. I had the vision board bug. I was following Tony Robbins, and I had landed a job at a boutique financial services firm as like their admin, answering the phone and filing, right? I was a glorified admin assistant. But I had a mentor who literally said to me when he hired me, one of the things that you're going to do is you're going to read something positive and motivational every day on our time. I was like, okay, you're going to pay me $11 an hour. And I just remember thinking, okay, whatever. But it was my first exposure to literally somebody handing me something that activated the big thinking that I already had. Now, the big thinking that I had was scarcity thinking, right? Like, I'm not going to live that way. I'm going to prove to everybody else. I'm going to move out, do it on my own, all that adult confidence. And Visa and MasterCard, by the way, showed up in my mailbox, like literally as soon as I moved out, and they became my angel investors. Okay.
Yeah,
They
right.
totally, like, literally subscribed to my dream, my big thinking. But the truth was that I was making $11 an hour, and I started spending like I was making 75. So here I was working for a financial services firm. I was learning. The first book handed to me was The Power of Positive Thinking, How to Win Friends and Influence People, all the greats, right? All the greats, Think and Grow Rich. So I had the vitamin of all the things that would make, a great life based on personal and professional development. But I was literally acting as though I already had it all and chasing all the shiny objects, charging credit cards, charging vacations, clothes. I was stressed, take a vacation, go to the spa, whatever. And honestly, I started playing the APR game, right? The credit card
Mhm.
switch, payday loans were coming in the mail, the checks back then with your name on them in bold, go to the bank, $1,000. What I found 2 years in was that I landed myself in major credit card and personal debt, right? Like for me, that was not a normal problem to have at 22 years old. Like
Mhm.
student loans are a problem today, but back then that was not even a problem. That was a problem. And I found myself literally like buried in the chains of guilt, right? Shame, didn't want anybody to know, playing the APR game until there was no more. Like I couldn't even make the minimum payments, right? So for me, I had to stop and like literally figure out, what am I going to freaking do? Like I had to figure it out. And I had to face that real sense of financial immaturity. It wasn't financial maturity. It was financial immaturity. And I realized that the way I was going to get myself out was I had to earn more, right? So I was
Mhm.
making pretty good money, but I was spending it all. And I luckily had gotten my securities license, my life insurance license, my health insurance license. I had a great mentor. He didn't know all this stuff was going on, but at the time that I was ready to clean it up, I also was able to activate 3 different revenue centers and work a part-time job, right? I had young, no kids.
Yeah.
So it took me about 3 years to get myself out of those, get out of debt and really develop a sense of financial maturity. And here's what I learned, right? I learned that financial consistency is what actually leads to financial stability. Like
Mhm.
being consistent, having a plan, not trying to keep up with the Joneses, right? Like actually having a consistent plan. I also learned that my desire for certainty was what I actually aligned my desire for certainty with the desire for clarity. Like, what do I want to have? What life is it? What does it take to get there? And even if in uncertain things, I could still figure out a roadmap. And I knew it if I sat down and actually figured out a plan. And that excited me because I didn't have a ceiling, right? As an entrepreneur, salesperson, I didn't have a ceiling. So that was exciting. And then the last thing that I learned was that having a plan, not just a dream and a big vision, is actually a big part of the formula to success, right? So I began to actually work on my mindset. I began to work on the money pieces. I began to work on investing, not just in myself, right, to continue to learn, but also investing, like in different investments, and bought my first home and all the things. I was like, you know what do you want? If you want to build wealth, like look at what the wealthy are doing. Look at the millionaire next door. They're not driving the shiniest, newest Lamborghini. They're literally like, you wouldn't even know that they're a millionaire. Mm-hmm. And so I started learning about, different things that people were doing. And I began to master my vision, master my mindset, master the money, and figure things out. Right. And then I was able to buy the company that I worked for at 29 years old. Now, fast forward, part of the backstory is fast forward to 2009. Things were pretty rosy, 2 kids, right? Picket fence, house. And we found ourselves, my former husband and I, in a place where things weren't working in the marriage. And I had to do something very similar to what happened in my 20s. I had to take a step back, reassess, make decisions when everything gets split in half 50% and you're in your 40s. All the things that we had built since we were 23 years old, right, had to be reassigned to each of us. And so I found myself in the same place with this. How do I navigate this unknown? Or for me, it was a planned transition, but most people find themselves in planned and unplanned transitions. How do you navigate it? Well, I took the steps back and I said, okay, what does it look like? What's the roadmap? What's the runway? How do we figure out these pieces? And I had to reassess again and realign and plan for whatever that next chapter was going to look like for me. I then in 2014, after having some stability around all of that, not made any big decisions, I also at that point decided that I needed more, right? I was finding myself completely stressed out in the hustle culture for, at that point, 2.5 decades. And I knew I wasn't healthy. I was disaligned from the business. The kids needed more. I needed more of them. You're talking about your time with Michelle and how you go out running and doing things. And everything was a distraction. My family was getting crumbs. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, it doesn't have to be this way. I knew it. You got this shoulder in the shoulder, right? And so I found myself, if I was going to make that decision to take an exit from a business that we had built over 17 years, I had to plan that too, right? Because my car was from the business, my health insurance was from the business, all those things. I didn't just wake up and say, I'm done. I had to have a runway to figure out what I call it lifestyle redesign planning. Mm-hmm. You're an entrepreneur and you're listening to this. Your personal finances and your business are married together, and we all know it. And sometimes we do things really well in the business and we navigate well and we're doing fine on managing cash flow. But over here in our personal lives, we aren't doing so well, right? Maybe we find ourselves, we didn't save enough for taxes, or there's credit card debt, or there's a disconnect from our partner in communication. But I found that when I got there, it was the same formula. It's like, okay, how do I take this big leap? So it always feels like there's a new chapter, a new leap. And I think that part of it is like having a design that aligns with what's the vision you have for your life right now. And then how can your business align with that? And today, I'm still an entrepreneur, still in business, took a year off to figure out what the heck I was going to do next. But even coming into this new chapter, whether if you change industries, there's still a runway that it takes for you to start making, being profitable in your business. So that's the backstory. It's a lot more interesting than the bio that says from this to this to this to this. Right?
Well, that's why I keep the bio boring, thanks to ChatGPT.
Yes.
That way we can get the real story.
Yeah.
I love that path. And first of all, in case you missed it, Michelle just said she took a year off to replan. You don't get to take a year off in your mid 50s or whatever, like she is, unless you do all the things that she just talked about doing, right? Like I picked up on that. I'm like, that sounds great. Like that's an awesome opportunity for you to do the next thing. And I have other friends in my life that are at that place, like, hey, why do you do this? Well, I don't really need the money, but I really want to do this and have an impact and those kind of things. And so that's kind of a good goal, I think, for all of us as entrepreneurs. And, you know, whether you're starting in your 20s or your 40s or your 50s, you can still get to that place. I'm curious what the logistics are. When you talk about having a plan, I think most of us, I always use this line. It's like, dude, we're all just making this crap up as we go along anyway. And that's kind of the with life, you know, because everything kind of gets thrown at you. But with in terms of business, like whether you've been in business for 10 years or 2 years or 20, most of the entrepreneurs and business people I know don't have a really a firm plan. The plan is like, what am I doing today to make payroll? What and in detailing, it's like, what does my calendar look like for this week? And if it's empty, I'll go do these things. If it's full, I'll go do these things. If I have cash in the bank, you know, these things. Can you walk me through kind of what that looks like or what you recommend it looks like?
Yeah. And I want to go back for a minute to what you said about, you know, taking the year off. And I think, you know, part of the things that we need to think about in business is I came to a crossroads where I had a plan to take the year off, but how many entrepreneurs actually come to a crossroad where there's a medical event, a health event, or whether it's with aging parents today or themselves. My husband today, he got hit by a car, was running a commercial grounds landscaping company. Literally a retired fireman stopped at the scene of an accident, got hit by a car, and it took him out, right? Like he had multiple surgeries and whatnot. So I think a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we've got to not just have the plan for when we might want to take a year off or that exit or transition, but we also have to have this plan, this thing that we're talking about, this navigating the GPS and managing finances in a way that if we are faced with an unplanned transition or an unplanned life event, what the heck are we going to do? Right. And I think that's one of the places where people fall short. They don't think about disability insurance. They think about life insurance, like, oh, my family would be rich when I die. Right. I'm worth more dead. We hear it all the time. But the truth is that if there's a death or a disability, and you have a business partner, right? How are you managing that? And so all of those things. I think, you know, I love your question because for me, what I teach in the Path to Profits in the flow pillar is it's really about reverse engineering. It's about looking at the marriage, like I said, between your personal life and your business, but understanding that in order to make things work on all levels, you've got to pay yourself first. Right. So at first, for me, I think it's a 4-step process. I think that you first have to determine, like, what are your top life goals? What do you want? Right. If someone says to me, you know, I want a jet in 10 years. I want my mortgage paid off in 15 years. I want to put my kids through college. Like, what are your top life and financial priorities? That's where it starts. Before we even talk about the business, I want to know, what the heck do you want out of your life? And it isn't just financial, right? It's your health goals, it's your family relationship goals, your spiritual goals, all of those things. So the opening chapter of the Path to Profits is the vision chapter. It's all about getting you to go under the hood and do the exercises to figure out, what the heck kind of life do you want to build? What are your values? What matters to you? If you say that adventure and fun is one of your core values, which are mine, right? They're on my core value list. If I see myself for 2 weeks, literally stressing and working and grinding and whatever, I simply can look at my core values and go, girl, you haven't done anything fun, right? Like you haven't had any adventure. And it reminds me, those core values are like that. They're really the signal that calls you when you're measuring out in your business, financially or otherwise, energetically, like, am I in alignment with the things I say I want to have? So I think the first thing is figuring out, what are your top financial priorities and life priorities? I think the second thing is actually doing a thorough lifestyle assessment. And what do I mean by that? It means going under the hood of your personal finances first to see what the lifestyle looks like, right? I say to people, it doesn't have to be complicated. It's a great time of year, because anytime is a great time of year because it's very simple. You can download 90 days of your bank statements, 90 days of your credit card statements, literally set a timer for an hour, right? But people get the numbers, they become emotional. The money, we become emotional, but you've got to take the emotion out of it. All you're looking at is data, right? Just like you look to see if your calendar's full and if you have appointments for people to come in detail with you. If you're if you carve out an hour, you can look under the hood of the personal lifestyle, look at what the recurring bills are. But most importantly, what is the rest of the lifestyle, right? 70% of the numbers come from our spending. It comes from the clothes. I just ordered contacts this morning. It was $417, right? Now that's not a recurring bill like my mortgage or a car payment, but it's part of my budget and it's happening for three of us in the household.
Oh yeah.
So, right? Yeah. If you have kids that come home from college, your grocery bill just probably doubled if you have a boy or boys, which is what happened to me. Right. So we've got to understand, like, do a thorough lifestyle assessment to know what the true number is in the lifestyle. And I think when we do that, then we can say, okay, if I'm single, it's all on me. If I'm part of a couple, then I get to sit down with my spouse and say, what part of this formula, what part of this number am I responsible for? So that now now you can come over to the business and say, okay, this is the paycheck I need to make everything function in my life. What's the business overhead? If you're brand new, you're going to figure out the pieces that are activating the business in the beginning. You've kept things maybe small as you come out of the gate, but you've got an emphasis on what you need the business to do for you. If you're already established, now we got to do the same thing. We got to go under the hood of the business, and maybe you're renting your garage. Maybe you've bought the building, all of the overhead, the recurring bills. And again, the same thing. If you have cost of goods sold, you're buying materials, you're replacing equipment, right? All those things have to be activated so that you can figure out the overhead of the business and then add your paycheck to it, right? The lifestyle number that you need to take. So I think the first thing is this reverse engineering is so important because it gets you to the first number. I always say, like, the first number is you saying to the universe, I'm opening the container. It can't be less than this. And if it is, then you see the gap. And that's where you get to get strategic. Are there things that I can cut? How can I make more money? I think a lot of people throw spaghetti at the wall and how they're going to grow their business. You guys focus on SEO and marketing and getting the phone to ring, right? With the right customers. Sometimes they're not even thinking about that. They just want the phone to ring. Well, guess what? If you're talking, I remember the phone would ring in the insurance agency. We stopped writing minimum limits of liability, right? It was like crap coverage. And yet we had a double truck $23,000 a year ad in the yellow pages. So who do you think was calling, right? All the minimum limits, DWI, SR22. When we changed our formula and said we no longer want that, we had to cut out that type of advertising because it was not calling in our ideal client. When you know what you need the business to do and you have the first revenue goal, I actually have people reverse engineer and work up to 5 set revenue goals for the year. And they're tied to personal and business, and all of that is in the flow pillar. But I think that that's the first thing. When you see the gap, the third thing is you get to reclaim the dollars. What can you do differently, right? Maybe you're doing the same thing you've been doing for 3 years and it needs to stop. Maybe you have dead weight and of somebody on your staff that they're not doing what they should be doing. It could be an energy in the business and it becomes toxic and they need to go so that the energy changes and the culture improves. It might be that you're working with the wrong client, the wrong marketing person, right? And you're just like, oh, they're doing my social media posts, but is the phone ringing? Is the phone ringing? And then I think fourth is creating and literally designing a workable plan that helps you get to the goals. So for me, I do that with clients by building out a cash flow projection, helping them set the 5 revenue goals, and then just strategically making sure that they have the right advisors on their team to make sure that the profitability is really the focus, but mostly aligned with not hustling, but working smarter, not harder.
Yeah. Now, how do you, when you have these conversations and you're making these lists and you're doing the numbers and all that, what happens when the gap is really big?
Yeah.
Is that and I know there's some mindset stuff. One of the things I've been working on lately with my mentor is this gratitude equation versus, so my personal struggle is this, what I call the money loop. The cash flow loop. And I think so many of us get into that, right? It's like, all right, if I check my orders today and I only had X, if I had a $0, which we've had some of those days when there's no money coming in, then do I stress out about whether or not, then does that start the loop? But if I have a really good day, that kills the loop, right? So that's a stupid way to do it. So what we did is I'm wearing this rubber band, if you can't see, but I've got a rubber band that I snap because what I started doing, and I'm a man of faith. And so I would literally just start praying and I'll say, and stupid stuff. Like, if I start getting in that loop, I'll be like, hey, Lord, thanks for this awesome keyboard, right? Like, thanks that I have the opportunity to have built in this little mini studio that I have or whatever. But I started doing that. And over like even just the course of a few days, I noticed that my brain was very gratitude focused, right?
I love it.
And so as you're talking about these big gaps, like I'm interested because I know this is kind of a space that you are personally, this mindset around, because you said scarcity mindset early on. When we're talking about this mindset around wealth and building your life and all of that kind of stuff, I'm interested in kind of your perspective, because I think in our industry in particular, there is a really big hustle culture.
Yeah.
I've talked about this on the podcast multiple times, but you'll get guys that they'll take a picture of a watch with a car behind it, and it's at 2 a.m. And they're basically saying to the world, look how awesome I am that I worked my ass off on this car. And I always tell them, you're dumb because you didn't plan well because you're doing a car at 2 a.m. but like that's kind of this hustle mentality. So walk me through some of that stuff, because I don't think a lot of small business owners, especially in our industry, really even think about this stuff.
100%. And nor did I, right? In the beginning, I was completely subscribed to the results and thus a divorce, right? Like, and we both were subscribing to two different things. So we landed there. I think it's really hard not to subscribe to that especially if you're coming to it with a scarcity mindset. I've got something to prove. And a lot of times I just need to take care of my family, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're doing the right thing as a man or a woman and you're trying to make it work. And the biggest thing that I love that you went to gratitude. It is the number one thing. It's the number one thing that if you can't find something to be grateful for in every day, at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. So my practice is in the morning, writing down 3 things that I'm grateful for. Actually, I use the Daily Greatness Journal, which is phenomenal. I've been using it for 8 years.
Oh, wow.
However, a friend of mine just sent me a gift yesterday, and he just created a new journal, a success journal, and it's very similar to the modeling of the Daily Greatness Journal. And I'm actually going to be sharing it out because I love it. I already ordered 10, like to give away as gifts. They're so good. And it's the morning and the evening, right? So when you're in a place of everything feels like it's imploding. I have a client right now that literally before we hopped on, we're in an economy right now where a lot of people from COVID till now have had to make different decisions, and they're all new decisions that they haven't landed before, right? So with COVID, doors got closed, money was there, you grabbed the money, now there's money and you're spending it and everything feels good. And then you come into this like new season of, oh no, there isn't money and I have these payments and business is different and all of these things. And it's like, that's business, but it's hard to navigate. So I think
we're in a state right now over the last 4 weeks, this international pissing contest that I call it. And like, I'm, whatever you want to, wherever you are politically, it's affecting consumer behavior.
Yes, we are in a trust recession, even in my industry, right? With consultancy, we're in a trust recession. People have literally invested in advisors and coaches, and they've gone to these big events, maybe, or like, one of their industry events, and somebody's on a stage, and what they don't know is that person might have paid $30,000 to be on that stage because they know that they're going to turn around and convert $1 million in the back of the room. Right.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, people have pulled out their credit cards, and I've watched people literally say to the person, I don't have the money for this, but I'm going to put it on my credit card and then I'm going to take it out of my 401k. Like they're literally telling the person in front of them that they are not financially qualified. And that person simply just takes the money. And like, instead of qualifying, right?
Yeah.
Like, is this really the best investment, or should you be hiring support? Should you grow the business? Are you like, what is it that a real diagnosis of what's going on? And so a lot of people are in this like major trust recession. And I think the biggest thing that I would say for entrepreneurs is don't bury your head in the sand, but also you need to turn off the news. Mm-hmm. You've got to figure out what's going to work for you to innovate and activate the things that you need to do, because at the end of the day, you're going to be in business or you're not going to be in business, right? And you can use the economy and all of the things happening as an excuse, to actually stay not in flow and to be out of gratitude. Because when you're not in gratitude, you're in fear, you're in resentment, you're in envy, you're in all these other places. So I think the biggest thing is working on those places, right? So my husband and I right now are reading The Map to Abundance out loud to each other. I've read it 6 times. I worked with the author. He's for the first time, we're reading it out loud, 10 pages a day. And he's like, oh. And it's to shift the mindset, right? So I want to come back to this place where the gap is really big, right? I think the first thing is you've got to lose judgment of self.
Okay.
The first thing is most entrepreneurs, if I'm in a room of 400 people and I ask how many people have a degree in entrepreneurship, maybe one hand goes up that there's an MBA in the room.
This episode is brought to you by Detailers Roadmap. Hey, spoiler alert, that's us. We all know you need a kick-ass website in order to be successful with your business. The good news is at Detailers Roadmap, kick-ass websites, that's kind of what we do. With the latest performance, designs, and SEO strategies, Detailers Roadmap is your one-stop shop to be successful on the web. And don't forget, we have the best support team in the industry. Whether you're an existing partner looking to improve your lead generation or you need a brand new website, Detailers Roadmap is here to help you be successful on the web. So go to detailersroadmap.com/success and get started today. That's detailersroadmap.com/SUCCESS.
Maybe one. Most people have no idea how to be an entrepreneur. They're listening to a podcast, this or that, but they don't have any formal financial knowledge or even on the personal finances, right? It's not taught in school. Calculus, trigonometry, statistics, that's what we've got jammed down our throat in school. So there isn't even a sense of like how to, in a healthy way, manage our personal finances. So the first thing is we've got to drop the guilt and shame. And we have to believe that wherever we are, like we're here, there's lessons that we've learned. We don't want to repeat them. But God has a plan. Like, if you have gifts and you're in your gifts and you're using those gifts for good in the world and you're doing it with a sense of pride, and I say pride not in a prideful way as you're talking about the 2 a.m, but truly from a place of making a difference in your family and your community, then good can come from that. Good will come from that. But it doesn't mean that we don't find ourselves because of lack of education and we're making the wrong decisions, right? Right now, Kevin, I have more phone calls coming in from people that are reaching out for financial guidance around their businesses because they've grabbed MCA loans, right? In the construction industry, they can't make payroll. So they have invoice factoring. They've got, maybe they've got some accounts, commercial accounts. They're doing cleaning, whatever. And they can't make payroll. And so they grab these loans, $50,000, $60,000 that then are daily payback, but they had no cash flow projection sheet to remind them that there's 5 payrolls next month, not 4.
Right.
And so the first thing is understanding that once you see what the gap is, take a breath and get support, right? And a lot of people come to me and say, I can't afford you. I don't even have the money to hire you as a consultant to work with me.
Right.
And you know what? It is really hard for me because I see that so many times, but I know this, if they don't make the decision to bring in support, they likely will be out of business in 12 months or find themselves in a worse situation. I think the first thing is being willing to look at the gap, letting go of the guilt and shame, really trying to move yourself away from the emotional component of where you are. And the only emotional component that you should have is the possibility of having an improved state, right? Improving the situation. A lot of spiritual teachers will remind us that where attention goes, our energy flows.
Yep. I have that on. That's Tony Robbins uses that one too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so if you put your attention on meeting your financial goals and your vision and anchor that energy with hard numbers and timelines and some education, you're definitely more likely to get where you want to go. And I think what happens is a lot of people just avoid the thing that's right in front of them because it's really scary. It's really scary to let somebody like me in the open up the closet and let me in. But you know what happens? I think because I've been there, and literally what I do is create this space of non-judgment of self or others in my mastermind rooms and any of my events when I work with people one-on-one. I've built trust. And I think that's where your brand is important, right? The branding is important. And like I said, sharing the messy middle is important because if people can't relate to me and all they hear is a 7-figure exit or, 37-year, whatever, if they don't hear the messy part, they truly don't believe that they can do it too. And I believe that they can.
Yeah.
I believe that they can, no matter how big the gap. Sometimes it's bankruptcy. Sometimes it's restructuring. Sometimes it's getting out of business partnerships that aren't working. But you have to be able to invite in support and trust. I mean, I trust that God puts the right people on my path.
Yeah.
So, when you said you're a man of faith, I'm like, well, of course you are, because I envision that the conversations that I'm going to have in my life today are with people that I can have a conversation about God in my life.
Yeah.
And by the way, I actually created an Oracle deck for entrepreneurs. I think it's the only one in the world, because I've always used affirmations and positivity as a way to ground my day. And so the gratitude is one of the things that I do. Journaling is another, prayer is another, and then choosing an affirmation. And so for 2 years, I literally prayed and I was like, give me a message. And over 2 years, I literally dialogued in a journal all of the divine downloads. And I have an Oracle deck called the Envision Oracle deck for entrepreneurs. So they could choose a card and ground themselves and journal maybe about that card if they're not good with journaling or, so I don't know if that answers your question,
It does. I mean, I think that's like, I was thinking as you were talking, you're talking about, grounding and gratitude and those kind of things. And I think that sometimes you inadvertently distract yourself from what you're supposed to be doing. And this is a big one for me. And that's why that's why getting out of this cash flow loop thing is a big one, right?
Yeah.
I found that I didn't mention this, but over those days, I'm currently rebranding one of my brands. And literally we scrapped everything and we're redoing everything. Website, funnels, all these things. And this is, Details Roadmap doesn't build these kind of websites. So I had to do it. I'm doing it myself. But I found like 8 hours later, I had just spent all this time just continually building and doing things that I had needed to be doing for the last 3 months. Right.
Yeah.
And part of me is like, why didn't I do this 3 months ago? But the other part of me is like, look how great this is. Like, first of all, I'm enjoying it to the point where I wear this Aura ring. And I don't know if you're familiar with these, but
my son has one.
Yeah, so it shows your restoratives and your stress throughout the day. And I'm one of those people, like if I have 15 to 30 minutes, like of stress, that's a big stress day for me.
Yeah.
My wife Michelle's like 2.5 hours, 3 hours. She just runs a little hotter than I do.
Yeah.
But what I found is on these days where I'm like in the flow, if you want to use a woo-woo kind of word, in the flow, but like grateful for what I'm doing and really focused, like I'm having 2 to 3 hours of restorative time, which is basically like your brain and your body are working in a state where you're actually feeding back into yourself versus giving it out in terms of energy and all that stuff. But I love that gratitude thing. And I think so many of us don't do that as kind of a practice. So I love that stuff.
I think the other thing too that I want to mention here is a lot of times what happens when you start to dig into these pieces that feel really, really hard in figuring out the money pieces, the cash flow pieces, is you got to have a small win. You almost have to have a small win every day, right? And so instead of, when people are like, well, what's a small win? Well, sell something. Like you probably likely have something in your closet, in your garage, in your business that you could sell, that you look over in the corner and it's been sitting there for 2 years, right? My husband now, like he had the landscaping company and I would be looking at equipment that would like go out once in a while. And, if there's stressors around don't have enough money for taxes or whatever it is in the business, or you have to replace another piece of equipment, like really look and figure out what can you get rid of? Because there's something really freeing when you realize that you've already made investments and that investment could have an ROI rather than just sitting in the corner and you're not using it, right? The other thing is cut something. Like we all can cut something, right? You can open up literally your iPhone right now, go to your contacts, pull open your name and hit subscriptions and go down the list and see how many things you're probably subscribed to that you don't even use. One of my favorite things to do is post on like social. I'll just do like a quick blurb and I'll put color behind it. And it says, who here has Audible credits? That's my whole post. Who here has Audible credits?
I'll just raise my hand if you can't see me shamingly raising my hand that I have 6.
I have 11. I have 5. I have 4, right? So this is my thing. It's like, okay, great. 1, go download the Path to Profits, right? And then I'll give suggestions. Go download 10x is better than 2x. Download Traction, right? Things that will help in the business. I'll ask them, where are they at in their life? What is it? What matters? And I'll have them download those books, put them in the library, and then literally canceled the subscription
Mm,
because you're literally getting pinged every single month for the $14.99 or whatever it is, depending on when you got in. And it's unconscious, but it
hmm
isn't unconscious because when we see it, you have an Audible credit. We actually are like, it's like not going to the gym, but you pay the gym membership. So
Right.
part of it feels like it's a punishment for not listening. Like the punishment of being pinged for the membership is like, well, I didn't go to the gym for 30 days, so I deserve to pay that. So I'll just let them take my money. We have to stop that. So cutting things out is important because like I can usually go under the hood and save people. I just saved somebody $30,000, literally looking at their subscriptions and their business and their personal life. That I had said, pull up, have your kids come in the room. They pull up the kids' iPhones, right? Everybody's got an iPhone. And there were like 7 subscriptions that one of the kids had. One was like, and now he's like yelling at the kids. I go, don't yell at the kid. Like you're the one that is teaching them, right?
Yeah.
And you're learning along the way. But one of the kids had like a dictionary subscription. And he's like, why do you have this dictionary subscription? You could just Google that. He goes, well, I only used it once. And it had been going on for 3 years, like
Oh,
literally.
wow.
It was in 8th grade. He goes, I used it once. He goes, when? 5th grade. So all this time, right? Because there was not a consciousness around like what. So now they were
First of
5,
all, put parental controls on your
right?
your iCloud account so that they
That's
can,
tip of the day.
so an 11-year-old can't go subscribe you to stuff.
Yeah.
But
So have a small win, sell something, cut something, and stop adding to the problem, right? If you
yeah,
know there's a problem, stop adding to it. Stop
yeah,
buying emotionally, stop making it worse. You're making a bigger mountain and start to actually just make a decision today that you're going to have a small win. And it could be any one of those 3 things, sell something, cut something, and stop adding to the problem. Right. And when you start to have a win every day or even each week in this area, you'll start to activate a sense of gratitude and also see that you are in control.
yeah.
Right.
I love that. One of the things I do in terms of the, like you talked about wins in the morning and wins at night. One of the things I do on my to-do list is I purposely, and I can't remember where this was, James Clear or one of those guys that
Yeah.
teaches this, but you basically put things on your morning list, your task list for the day, that is almost like a guaranteed win. Like I
Yes.
know that I can accomplish this. And then at the end of the day, that
You
is
feel
almost like you're going to get that win, which actually helps you then do things that are a little bit less guaranteed the next day, but always putting things on and then reminding yourself at the end of the day
yeah.
what you actually accomplished that day. Because what we normally do is like, oh, well, I did this wrong, or I did this wrong, or things didn't go well, or
Yeah.
whatever, which is good for evaluating, but the gratitude side of it is so much easier.
I want to speak to one thing around this gratitude piece and even just our role, right, as entrepreneurs. And I want to speak to the people that are in business walking this journey, and we know how hard it is, right? Like this is not for the faint of heart, this business owner journey. We have this, we have one of the things that's a true gift, and it could be a curse or a gift if we don't manage it well, is that there are little eyes looking, right? And those little eyes become teenage eyes, become adult eyes. And I think one of the things that I love about the gratitude practice is we get to look at places where we can impact our children, right? And so they are already watching. They're watching your stress. They're watching the outbursts. They're watching you up at 2 a.m, whatever. They might even be watching your social media. They might be listening to the arguments. But when I think about the things that are positive in our lives, right? One of the things that I did was we implemented a gratitude jar in the kitchen, and each person would put something in there about another person in the household, something nice about that person in the household that day. Like they had to find something, right? Again, it teaches you that if you really, really look, you might find something, right? Maybe it was a look, a smile, or whatever. They didn't tick you off that day. But mostly I implemented a gratitude practice. And I think the other thing too is when we take ownership of our behavior, our reactions, and how we walk, and we understand that it's already heightened when you're an entrepreneur because there's so many things flying at you, but we also can find ourselves really short with our kids and our spouses, really short, right? And so the invitation is to really take a little reflection if you're listening and ask yourself, like, are you proud of how you're showing up? Is your family or spouse getting crumbs? And what could you do better? You know, I love listening. I was listening to one of your podcasts and you talked about how you and Michelle, were going out and you usually run in the morning and then you were like, oh, it's midday, but like there's an intentionality
Mm-hmm.
around how you're going to show up for each other each day. And it isn't just business focused. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that I made in the beginning, and you'll hear about this if you listen or read the Path to Profits, is that I found myself, it wasn't the business was the priority. The metrics was the priority. Taking care of 22 employees who had to be fed first and the bank and all the things that happened when I bought that business were the priority because I didn't want to fail. But I was failing at my life
Yeah.
and winning huge at business. And at the end of the day, you always hear people will remember how you made them feel, not what you did.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think this is an invitation as we're having this conversation about closing the gap. Where are the gaps? Is it maybe there's financial gaps, but are there also relational gaps? Right. And can we do better? Because we need to do better in all areas.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I do is try to teach entrepreneurial men how to have better marriages. Like married, my goal is like, I want your first marriage or to be your only marriage and for it to be as awesome as mine is. We got 30th is in July. And it gets better all the time. Like, there's a guy, Dr. Gary Chapman, the 5 love languages uses the phrase, well, you can't unscramble eggs, right? So you got to work from where you are. So if you, like yourself, if you've been divorced or whatever, you learn from those things and work those. But I love that gratitude jar. I do something similar and I teach something similar with Michelle, which is I have these I love you cards, things I love about you cards. And I was reminded to redo it because it's been a year or two since I've done it. But literally I write things I love about, something I love about her on a 3x5 index cards. And I taped it up all around her mirror in our bathroom. We have a decent sized master bathroom. And so she has her own sink. And so by the end of the year, there's like 300 plus of these 3x5 cards around her. But I love the idea of doing it for your whole family. You can actually do this within your business. You could tell, you can show gratitude. Obviously the language changes a little bit, but I think that's something great. But showing those around you, I really have tried, and this is crazy that we're having this business-esque podcast, but we talk about having life, life, business, and everything in between. And this podcast, I think if you can take away some of these personal behaviors and mindsets around it, it's going to help
business.
Your business. And what I found in dealing with men in particular is you got business, spiritual, physical, relational, and most of the time only 1 or 2 of those 4 or 5 things are being done well.
Yes.
Like there's always something. If your business is awesome, most of the time your fitness sucks and your relationships suck, right? If your relationships and fitness are awesome, your business is probably not getting enough attention. So it's this whole balance.
Yeah.
Along those lines, I want to ask you a question that I've had the debate about with other guests and with other friends. I had a friend of mine that said, every morning I go to my business and I just hate it. And then he said, I know I shouldn't. And I said, well, my answer to him was maybe not. What other things do you do? And he's like, well, I also do this thing and I do this thing and I absolutely love those things. And I'm like, maybe you should just go do those things.
Yeah.
I think so many times, first of all, we all use the phrase entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we're really a business owner, which is totally fine. That doesn't necessarily mean you're an entrepreneur and you're less than or whatever. Do you find in your conversations getting to a point where like, maybe this isn't for you? Right.
Yes.
Like, and how, like, I want to make that okay for people. Like, I don't want to discourage people to close their business down, but like, if you've been at this for 15 years and you hate your life and you don't see a path to improve it, I always say you either need to do something differently, do what you're doing differently, or do something else.
Do something differently. I 100% agree with you. And I've had many people in this last 8 years of working with entrepreneurs at that, I call it the emerging stage. That first, 1 to 5 years is that emerging stage, that aspiring stage where, I'll come in year 3 and we'll work together for a year, sometimes 2 years. And the truth is that they have amazing gifts that they're trying to turn into a business, right? And they had some consistent revenue in the beginning, and then things didn't turn out and they're offered whatever. And I've had two people in the last 3 years that I said, look, your gifts are being stifled because you're not activating revenue. You've drained your 401k. There's a strain on the marriage, whatever. And literally, I was like, would you just go to LinkedIn and like literally just put in your gifts and see what happens? Two of them have left, closed the doors to their business with such energy because it was draining them, sucking them dry. It wasn't failure. They never had gone to actually look out there after they left their corporate job at what else was available because they didn't want to go through the pain again of being corporate or whatever. And they both landed jobs that were $250,000 a year. They weren't even making six figures in their business, right? And all the stress. And today are so happy. One of them is running a nonprofit for entrepreneurs. She's like phenomenal. But I kept watching her. She was the head of the BNI. She was head of the chamber, all these things. She was great at being in front of the room and like literally spinning and connecting people. But she wasn't good at sales or attracting people to her business. And no amount of marketing was going to change that. Right. And she didn't have enough in the business to hire a salesperson. Like it just, and today I watch her. She actually supported me in an event in Providence, and she is in her gifts, and her marriage is better. She's lost 50 pounds. She's so happy because she feels valuable. I think a lot of times we find ourselves, even in our business, like, are we in our gifts? Sometimes we're so married down with all the things that we're doing, right? And I say to people, you've got to like look at your business and be like, is it the business? And maybe there's some structural things like the systems and people that you need support, right? And you have to look at like literally, it's like an eating diary, right? Like you write down everything you're going to eat for 3 days, right? Every single day you write down every single task that you did. And you actually take a look and you do this inventory. What do I have no business doing? Right? What am I doing well? What do I love to do? What am I doing well? What am I doing, but I really have no business doing it? It really needs to be delegated, but I don't have anybody to delegate it to. And then what do I have literally, like, what could be dumped? Why are we even doing this anymore? Right? So I think doing an inventory, the first place is to say, is it the functionality of the business that's sucking you dry and how you're showing up? And maybe you're a power player. You don't want to delegate. You don't trust that you can invest in help and in human capital. Like there's so many things. And then at the end of the day, if you can make some changes, like I knew when I hit this space in my business, like I love insurance. If you're an insurance person, I'd be like, let's talk insurance. I love it. I was great at it. And people today are like, why are you not doing it? Well, because the functionality of the business and how I wanted it to, how I wanted my life to shift, it wasn't going to happen in that model. I would have had another divorce. Okay. Because I had a business partner. Now, if I didn't have a business partner, I may very well been able to navigate more hires or whatever, and then moving myself into a place of, working less and even making less because I didn't care. I was like, I'll make less and work less. But I think again, it's stepping back and doing an inventory about what are your core values? Go through the invitation, go through the vision pillar of the path to profits, do the exercises. You can read the book and it'll all be great because it's good in theory. But if you want to actually have transformation from where you are to where you want to go, you work with somebody like yourself for support to figure it out. You want a better marriage? Call Kevin and his wife, right? Like read something, do something, but make a decision to go under the hood and actually figure it out. Don't just keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result.
Yep. That's insanity, right? That's the whole definition of insanity thing.
Yeah.
If you want to dig into a couple of those topics, first of all, grab Michelle's book for sure, Path to Profits, on Amazon and Audible. So you can use one of those Audible credits that you have. And by the way, I listen to all business and education books at 1.5 to 2. Like that's how but all personal books, I listen to 1. So I will give you a compliment that you sound great even at 1.5 or 1.75. So it's not always true. Sometimes people just sound like Alvin from the Chipmunks. But so along what she was talking about, I had a guest named Ray Sanders. He was our 100th episode like 2 weeks ago. Great friend of mine. He has a core values thing that he deals with, so you can
I'm
listen to
listening to
that.
him right now, by the way.
Yeah, really. He's amazing. He's such a cool guy. I had a couple hours with him on the phone yesterday, and he's just an amazing dude. Happens to live half a mile from my dad in Oklahoma City,
Cool.
so that's really cool. And then to your point about things that you do and shouldn't do and all of those things, listen to the episode with Grant Menard, actually any of them. Grant Menard's a good friend of mine, good friend of the podcast. He's been on multiple times, but he actually has a call. He does 3 columns,
Yep.
which is, things that I love doing,
Yep.
things that I do, but probably shouldn't be. And then his is the F that column.
Yes.
Like that third column is like things that I absolutely hate to do and definitely don't want to do anymore.
Yes,
And so but doing that inventory and looking under the hood is really awesome.
It really is key, right, to improving anything.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I thank you so much for taking the time and educating us on some of this stuff. We'll have to have you back and talk about some other stuff, but
I love it.
how do we find out more information? If someone wants to look, if someone wants to have a conversation with you, maybe do some coaching with you, obviously pick up the book on Amazon and wherever else. But how do we connect?
Yeah, so I keep it really simple. It's simply Michelle Jacobik, right? So michellejacobik.com, Michelle Jacobik on LinkedIn, Michelle Jacobik on social channels. I've kept this super simple. So people can find me anywhere. If they want tips, tricks, motivation, inspiration, Instagram, TikTok, all the places, not a lot on TikTok, but Instagram and Facebook. And then my website, right? Like you can go there, you can book a clarity call with me and have a conversation about where you are now. And let me go under the hood a little bit with you and figure out like where you are and where you're feeling stuck and whether or not I might be a good fit, right? To help you improve the situation. And then LinkedIn professionally, right? If there's somebody listening that has come across the podcast and you're doing something that I'm not, let's have a conversation there as well. Because I think that that's the beauty of the ripple effect in the world, is that we could have conversations that are robust and then help people that aren't in our circles.
Yeah, I love that. And it's Jacobik. So Michelle Jacobik, in case you are phonetically challenged. But that's the way to find her. This has been awesome. I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm so excited to be able to connect with you and to network and teach some of these business owners some new and exciting things. So thanks a lot.
Thanks for a robust conversation, Kevin.
Yeah. Head over to detailersroadmap.com and get your one-stop success solution today.